For now, to help us break down the day's top headlines and how all of these issues intersect is Jenna Ellis, a senior legal advisor to the Trump campaign and a personal attorney to President Trump. So, Jenna, I want to focus on what's going on Capitol Hill right now, because I remember it wasn't too long ago you and I were talking about the idea of police reforms and how Republicans and Democrats might be able to find some common footing. And that fell through. And now here we are with coronavirus relief legislation as well. Republicans and Democrats also can't get anything done on this front as well. Does this all come back to the 2020 campaign?
Oh, of course it does, Alex. And you know what's so shameful about how the Democrats are treating this is that they would rather play partisan politics like they always do, rather than reaching across the aisle and actually working with President Trump, because they don't want to give him the perception of a win on anything. And what they're not acknowledging is that it just shows what losers they are, that they would rather go through all of this red tape, and they would rather try to push through their leftist progressive agenda rather than give relief to the millions of Americans who are suffering because not only of this China virus, but also because of the Democrat policies that have lost Americans so many jobs, have shut down their states. I mean, this is just a Democrat disaster.
And even when we look at these pieces of legislation, too, whether it was the police reform one or this $1 trillion coronavirus relief package, those are something that in the past Democrats would have championed. I mean, those are pretty substantial reforms on both of those issues. When it came to police reforms, the only thing that was standing in the way is the abolishment of qualified immunity. And then when we were talking about the coronavirus package, it's the difference of another $2.4 trillion between those two bills, which are it's an extraordinary figure. I mean, it's something that we haven't seen in any legislation between now and then. But do the American people care about these issues, or will it be a different issue that's on their minds when they go to the ballot box in November?
You know, I think that given how close we are, we're only a few months out before the election, and even less time than that when early voting starts. I think that is going to be an issue that's on the minds of the American people, that overall, are they going to put in office someone like President Trump and all the way down ticket people in office who care about the American people and have that track record and reelect the president who has built the greatest economy in American history? Or are they going to put in office someone like Joe Biden and his handlers who are going to play politics and just use all of the tools at their disposal for corrupt power? And so I think this really will be one of the biggest issues on the ballot. But just broadly speaking, are they going to choose pro-America and President Trump and continue our trend of prosperity and safety and American ideals and freedoms? Or are they going to vote for tyranny? And no one in a reasonable framework that isn't just taking up the mainstream media's news on this, you cannot look at the platforms and the differences of what President Trump has championed and everything that he's been so successful at. And you can't look at that contrasted with the platform that Joe Biden is running on in his communist manifesto and choose that as an American who loves liberty and freedom.
You bring up an interesting point, and it's the idea that it's not just the presidential race that people should be looking forward to, but those down the ballot races. And if we look back to 2018, we see how important it was for the Democrats, for example, to take back the lower chamber. I mean, it essentially got us impeachment. It essentially got us these ongoing hearings, the different investigations, if you will, into the president and these different avenues, and of course, then blocking pieces of legislation. So when we look ahead to 2020, do you believe that having President Trump on the top of the ticket, since he wasn't there back in 2018, do you think that'll make a big difference when it comes to the down the ballot races, whether it be in the Senate, Congress, or even at the more local level?
I hope so. And you know what happened with the Democrats taking over the lower chamber in the House? This allowed for even more obstructionism. And so we're seeing, I think, also federalism that is showing how the state and local races are so incredibly important, because President Trump has remained faithful to the Constitution to provide the resources and recommendations from the federal government to each of the states. And we're seeing that contrast between states like South Dakota that are led by a wonderful Republican governor versus New York and California and Nevada, and all of these restrictions from the Democrats on the state and local level. So I think more than any other election that in recent American history, especially during a time when there is a presidential election, I think that everyone is going to pay more attention to all of the offices all the way down ticket, probably more than we ever have in a presidential election cycle.
No, I think you're right. And I think that even more so than other previous elections, we're seeing other politicians get more involved. And I mean that in the sense that, for example, this weekend at the DNC, we're going to see the Obamas speaking. We're going to see the Clintons speaking. We're going to see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez speaking. They want to put together a seemingly coalition of unity against President Trump and the Republican Party. Do the Republicans need to do something similar? Because we know that President Trump is extremely popular in the party. We know that President Trump has, I believe it's something like a 90% approval rating within the Republican Party. Do we need to get other people on board, if you're a conservative, in order to kind of put together that unity against the Democratic messaging?
Well, I think that President Trump, with his America First agenda, has the unity of the American people behind him. And, we've seen all of the boat parades. We've seen how many people, until unfortunately the rallies had to be stopped for the interim of the pandemic. We've seen how much this president is so popular among his fellow citizens. And, Alex, it's always so amazing to me when President Trump, just like every other prior president since George Washington, comes out and says, my fellow citizens. That's so unique in America that we get to select and prefer who among our fellow citizens is in office. We have that peaceful transition of power. We've seen how that didn't happen between Obama and the Trump administration and everything going on with that. And so when we, the people, get to select and prefer one of our fellow citizens, it doesn't matter which of these, Republicans in name only, like the Mitt Romneys of the world. It doesn't matter whether they endorse Trump. He has the motivation behind we, the people. And we, the people, are going to show up on election day and we're going to vote for our citizen president because he's one of us. And we don't care about the elitists in Washington. I don't even think that's necessary. He has incredible enthusiasm behind him.
No, and that is a very positive thing to bring up as we look around the world and really take for granted what we have here in the United States. I mean, we're keeping an eye on what's going on in Belarus, for example, and other elections that take place in the Middle East and other parts of the world where those same luxuries are taken for granted. So I think you bring up a really strong point, and that's something that American people do want, they do strive for, and it's something that will be on the ticket for them to decide come November. And that's the great thing about our republic. Jenna Ellis, I appreciate you coming on tonight and breaking down this issue. Thank you.